Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I want to talk to you about just give you a little bit of preview and to kind of catch you up with where we are going to probably not have time to cover, but it is something that I think is really important to talk about. In astroherbalism, we can't not talk about medical astrology because plants, which is, the um, focus of astroherbalism, besides astrology, plants work on the body. And that's how we use them as medicine. So we have to kind of understand what's happening in the body astrologically, and therefore how plants can help with the whole astrological tapestry that's being woven here down on earth in our own embodiment. So let's go ahead and get started. And I want to kind of do it in a way that is very often not utilized and not focused on a priority. When we get into medical astrology, the first thing we hear and we talk about, and you've seen from me and you've probably seen from others, is the astrology of the body. And that's basically going through head to toe all of the zodiac signs and what they represent, as well as some planets and what they represent or correspond to, or how they influence different organs and systems of the body. But what most people don't talk about is the sign polarities. Now, in astrology, as a separate study and practice for our own psychological and emotional well-being, sign polarities is also something in that respect of astrology that often doesn't get talked about or utilized as it should. Same with medical astrology. So I want to talk to you about how the sign polarities, or the opposite signs, work in tandem in the body too, and hopefully how that can maybe translate into your own way of understanding the signs and the sign polarities and all balances within and without ourselves, in a new way, hopefully. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, of course, is Aries. Aries is the first sign. Aries' opposite sign is Libra. It's the first sign on the wheel of the year, or on the natal chart, that switches us into the top half of the chart. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just going to keep moving on because it's not important to medical astrology, at least right now in this introductory phase. But Aries and Libra are opposite one another. And we have to remember that if you are somewhat familiar with medical astrology, Aries rules the head, basically everything in the head for the most part. Now, there's a lot of different things going on in our head that is very, very complex. There are different parts of the head that have other co-rulerships, but that's not any different than certain signs having two rulers, or even the fact that we are American and we are, governed under the federal government and our own individual state government. So we are kind of co-ruled by two separate things individually based off on our geographical location. That is a really great analogy to help us see how we embody that complication thing too, and having more than one rulers, or having more than one identity, or kind of fitting under the realm and the jurisdiction of more than one thing. And so that's a great analogy, and hopefully that makes sense. But to kind of keep things less mental and kind of more reminding of the way that you're doing these things too, and you're getting along in your life just fine. So Aries rules everything pretty much in the head for the most part. Like I said, there are some things in the head, like the eyes, the teeth, the skull in general, the brain. There's certain things in the head that have co-rulerships with Aries, but generally speaking, we're going to say that Aries rules the head and Libra rules the kidneys. Now, Libra rules a few other things here, but think about those scales of balance. The kidneys are two things that are very balanced, and they're also in this lower part of the abdomen, kind of closer to the hips. And it's like we kind of swing our hips when we walk. That lower lumbar area is also ruled by Libra. Think about all the scales in the body, all of those balancing, and it's basically in that centrifugal force in the center of our body where our movement, and it's an air sign, so movement kind of makes sense too, where our movement kind of is balanced in the hips area. But we're not saying Libra rules the hips themselves, but it's really that lower lumbar area, the kidneys, and a few other things that we'll talk about. But basically, the kidneys and the head. So Aries and Libra, this polarity is really important for us to remember in like the way that we think about astrology psychologically speaking, where it's me, it's my identity, it's who I am, it's how I, my personality, fighting for myself and the things that are important to me, standing up for myself, where Libra is about compromise and remembering that there are other people involved and that it doesn't have to always be about me. And maybe sometimes we should be thinking about the welfare of others too. So it's a great, great balance there in Libra, as we know about, is the first time we encounter the opposite of signs. It's the first time we encounter the need for balance. And then that's why it is a sign of balance. So how are, in medical astrology, these seemingly two different things related? How is the head of Aries and the kidneys of Libra related in the body? We're going to talk about that now. Aries and Libra, generally speaking, this polarity in the body regulates all types of balances in the body. So the kidneys maintain the salt and fluid levels of the body and help to kind of keep toxic substances from building up. That's a great thing. There's a lot of different organs that do that, like the pancreas and like the liver, the kidneys as well. But the kidneys is kind of the first area where it's going to eventually go out of us very quickly after it kind of gets into the bladder and then so on and so forth. But the bladder is technically ruled by Scorpio. So the kidneys maintain the salt and fluid levels of the body, and it helps kind of differentiate what is toxic, what needs to be removed, and kind of start that process. Remember, this is a cardinal sign. So because of that, the kidneys and the urinary tract, which is basically the tubes that kind of connect with the like kind of loop in the area of the reproductive organs of anybody, with kind of looped around in that area of the lower portion of the body that's kind of connecting to the bladder and the kidneys. So it's like these tracks a little bit. The kidneys and that genitourinary tract are really only as strong and healthy as the adrenal glands. Get that? That to me blows my mind, because the adrenal glands are its energetic support. Why is this important? Because the kidneys, right on top of the kidneys, sits the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are ruled by Mars, which in turn is the ruler of Aries. So right here, we can begin to see how two glands and organs of the body are sitting on top of one another and literally need each other's energetic support for health and strength. This is the first time that we see Aries and Libra coexisting and coordinating together. Also, the health and strength of the adrenal glands underlies that of the eyes, believe it or not, kind of bringing back up to Aries as well. And remember that all of this also depends on the health of the kidneys, which is Libra too. So why is that? I'm not a doctor. I did not go to school for medicine. I think I did in another life, but I can't answer like those in-depth questions. I think that's maybe for a different time why that is. But it's just the health of the entire ecosystem of our own terrain really all depends on, it's a collective effort. So the strength of the adrenals kind of gets sloped back up into the eyes. And I think a lot of us, I don't know about you, but I really do tend to experience incredible eye strain when I'm stressed. And I think it creates more stress, which it creates headaches and migraines for me, at least. But that's also me. Now, speaking of the brain and migraines, the medulla oblongata, if you're thinking of the water boy like I am, the medulla oblongata from the water boy, that Sailor movie, contains the nerve centers that actually regulate the heart and respiration rate. That's like that automatic involuntary part of the brain that's controlling our breath and our heart circulation. So that part of the brain regulates all of our physical and mental activities. That's super fucking important. Together, these pairing systems really help us with our basal metabolism as well, and all balances in general. So it's our metabolism, and it's our salt and fluid level balance. It's our alkaline and acid balance. All of those things happening. Again, remember that the adrenals and the kidney health are literally connected together and kind of shoot back up to the eyes too. Moving on to Taurus and Scorpio, this is my favorite of the polarities. I don't know, I know why, but it's my favorite. This is the generative axis. It's called AXIS. This generative axis basically rules over consumption, elimination, and procreation within the body. So since Taurus rules the throat and the mouth, actually Taurus actually rules the starting at the lower jaw, that is a separate piece that attaches separately to the skull, basically the upper teeth and the upper part. All of this one piece of the skull is Aries, and then moving downward, the lower part of the jaw, the entire mouth itself really, and basically to here, this whole area is Taurus. So Taurus rules the throat, and everything that's kind of within it. There, again, just like we talked about in Aries, there are different parts within the throat that are ruled by other things, but generally speaking, that whole area would be under Taurus's rule, and it basically rules everything. If you think about that, it's ruling everything that kind of comes into our body. It's also kind of co-ruling hearing with Gemini, Gemini and Mercury, but Taurus is all of our physical senses too. It's taste, it's smell, it's sight, it's hearing, and it's touch as well. But this is the area that's concentrated and generally ruled by Taurus. Everything we take into the body, which is where the physical senses that I just mentioned, is part of how we receive things into ourself as well, whether it's kind of non-physical and intangible, something more auditory or visual, smelling, in touch. These are all things that even if they're not going into the mouth and into the actual body, they're going into us in some way. That's all Taurus. Scorpio, on the other hand, rules the opposite end of this, which is the area of elimination, what comes out, everything that we release out of our bodies. It's the other end. Scorpio also rules over our reproductive organs as well. And there are different things depending on what type of body you have. Different areas might be technically ruled by the moon or Cancer or Venus, or maybe even Mars, but Mars is connected to Scorpio too. But generally speaking, the reproductive organs, if you're a cyclical human, if you're someone who bleeds and someone who has a womb, Scorpio rules those regions of the body when you are not pregnant. When you are pregnant, that womb, those ovaries are Venus, the womb is Cancer, all of that stuff as well. But Scorpio's is ruling the vulva, the vagina, the prostate, the anus, the colon, all of those things. So with this, Scorpio side of the axis is kind of about creating a means of survival beyond the self, children, procreation. Whereas Scorpio, it's kind of about the survival of the self, taking things in to the body, building what we kind of are building off of owning in Aries or identifying with in Aries. In Scorpio, we kind of take that idea and expand it beyond ourselves because we know that we're not going to be here forever. And so our legacy, our self, needs to continue on in the next cycle, i.e., children. So this generative side of the axis rules both growth and development, which is Taurus, and death and reproduction, and all those types of death, rebirth cycles in the body in Scorpio. And that's why these two are connected. In sexual relationship, we also use both our mouth and our genitals for lovemaking. Solid waste products of digestion pass through the Scorpio region. Solid waste products, actually non-solid waste products of respiration, meaning water and carbon dioxide, pass through the Taurus region of the body, although respiration is not ruled by Taurus at all. That's in the next polarity. But both Taurus and Scorpio, due to their receptive elements of water and earth, or yin type receptivity, and their fixed modality, are strongly influenced by the subconscious mind. Now, Gemini and Sagittarius is the more respiratory axis, where it just happens to pass through the Taurus region. But Gemini actually rules the whole respiratory tree with the trachea, the twins of the lungs, all of those things as well is under Gemini's rule. Now, this axis of Gemini and Sagittarius, I have so much Sagittarius and I have a few Gemini things, and it's so interesting. I feel like, I don't know if you relate to this idea, but this is something where I feel like it took me forever to kind of understand how these two signs were related. Same with a few other things, and it's always the ones that I have a lot of energy. So it's like a blind spot thing, I think. But this is the respiratory axis, where it basically rules distributive and locomotive functions of the body. So Gemini and Sagittarius are both yang, or kind of outward focused energy signs, where they're pertaining to the light and subtle energetic functions of the body in mutable signs. Mutable sign polarities, this is our first one here in Gemini and Sagittarius. Later we have Virgo and Pisces. These two polarities tend to be a little bit more etheric, a little bit more intangible, except for Virgo. Virgo's rather tangible, but they tend to be a little bit more dispersive and a little bit less concrete, both psychologically, emotionally speaking, and in this case, physically speaking, in medical astrology as well. But basically, Gemini, we're kind of looking at all the fact that it rules all the tubes of the body, which basically, I think, perfectly mirrors Hermes or Mercury's mythological traveling up and down to the upper world, to the underworld, to Earth, kind of like the traveling aspect there. And it's traveling, it's basically any tubes of the body where basically essential body materials kind of get delivered to the cells, kind of like delivering messages all throughout the body, like a neural network, so to speak. But generally, any kind of tube, not just a neural or nervous system thing. Sagittarius, on the other hand, is more locomotive and movement based, in the fact that it literally allows us to get where we are going, because it rules the hips, the thighs, the butt. Although some people say Scorpio rules the butt, Scorpio technically is more about the perineum and the anus, as opposed to like the muscles of the buttocks, which is, I think, more Sagittarius. And so with all of these muscles, we literally couldn't walk to where we need to get to. We literally couldn't get where we're going with the muscles of the upper legs. And since the liver is ruled by Jupiter, that actually sits, which is Sagittarius's ruling planet, it actually sits right underneath the diaphragm, which is ruled by Gemini, which is part of that as well. And the liver and the digestive congestion that can happen in this area and sensitivity can also really spill over into the respiratory sensitivities and allergies too. When we think about our digestion, because the liver is so deeply connected near our stomach and has a lot to do with our digestion and our discrimination of waste products that comes from digestion and what we're putting into our stomach, the Gemini, it's right kind of underneath the respiratory area. So some of these things can literally kind of energetically get loped back and forth in these areas. Now, Cancer and Capricorn polarities are all about, to me, security. Security, and whether it's on a material level with Capricorn or more of an emotional level with Cancer. This is the self-parenting axis. When I'm talking about looking at this in the chart more psychologically or emotionally speaking, in medical astrology, this is thought of being the structural and protective axis, or the more nutritive axis, because Cancer rules all of the body's containers. It rules the protective sacs or protective water sacs of all of the vital organs too. There are basically literally water sacs, sheaths around the heart, the liver, the brain, which are technically the meninges, the spleen, just almost every vital organ has this protective water sac, and that protective water sac is ruled by Cancer, but the organ inside of it might be ruled by something else. Capricorn, on the other hand, rules the knees, which is our support system. And with Saturn, it's basically, with Saturn's influence, it's basically rules the entire skeleton and skin, which is, again, structure and protection from the outside world. I will kind of keep a note that Saturn does generally rule the entire skeleton, including the teeth that are found in the Aries and Taurus regions, but including the ligaments, all bonds. Bonds are a great word to remember, like what Saturn does in the body. So that means ligaments and things like that too, things that bond muscles to skeleton. That is under the realm of Saturn. And because Capricorn is so heavily influenced by Saturn as its ruling planet, we can think about bone when we think about Capricorn too, as well as skin. So psychologically and psychosomatically within the body, there are a lot of deep issues connected with this axis. Security issues, emotional expression versus restraining our emotions, self-nurturing versus self-denial or self-betrayal, self-betrayal. Many of these problems and concerns are often rooted in our family's background. Sometimes, not always. We're not always meant to blame our parents, but for the most part, our childhood experiences do have a big role to play in how we self-parent as we get older. This is because of how we choose to literally nourish ourselves with nutrients. And this is an axis where we may first see big signs of maybe not food allergies, but specific relationships to food. Actually, we might see that in Taurus and Scorpio polarity as well, but I really think that Cancer and Capricorn, if you have heavy planets there, I'm not going to use this as a diagnostic tool for you, but I'm just using this as a general educational tool that generally speaking, some of us who have heavy Cancer and Capricorn placements might have a very specific relationship to food based on how we were told to kind of nurture ourselves. Um, that's just one way that it can show up, but there can be a lot of food sensitivities, food allergies, or even like detrimental relationship and emotional relationships to food as well. So Leo and Aquarius polarity is all about circulatory and energizing functions in the body because of it being intimately connected to the heart, which pumps blood and energizes everything within us, within our body. Leo is the ruler of the heart, and it is the core of the circulatory system, whereas Aquarius, is all of its periphery. I think this is a great polarity where we can like visibly understand how these two signs really literally kind of weave back and forth. Leo is the heart that pumps blood out. Aquarius is the end of the circulatory system in the periphery, and the muscles in the area, including specifically in our shins um, and our calves, that pump the blood back to the heart. That is literally Leo and Aquarius working really well together. Between them, they shuttle the blood back and forth. And this pair is responsible for a basic chemical reaction that takes place in every cell of the body, oxidation. So this is oxygenation, oxygen, why can't I say that? Oxygenation of the body is ruled by Leo and Aquarius, which is basically when the combination of oxygen and glucose produce energy. Leo and Aquarius, being yang or outward focused fixed signs, tend to govern the sympathetic branch of the automatic nervous system, which basically influences the function. The automatic nervous system itself functions as ruling the all of the functions of the internal organs. But the automatic nervous system, the sympathetic branch of it, actually largely controls our, our unconscious regulatorily body functions like the heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, all like urination, sexual arousal, which I think is also has a little bit to do with the medulla oblongata that we talked about too, which is another fire and air polarity as well. But the yang part of this system that is under the Leo and Aquarius, which is the sympathetic part of the automatic nervous system, is actually the flight or flight response. Whereas Taurus and Scorpio is the parasympathetic or yin side of the automatic nervous system, which rules rest and digest. So yang, flight or fight, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the yin, or more downward bearing stuff, controls the rest and digest part of our automatic nervous system. I love that. So associated as well with the Leo and Aquarius axis are conditions of chronic stress and hypertension, overwork, driven by the powerful demanding nature of these two signs that really do tend to aggravate and overstimulate this part of the sympathetic nervous system, which I think does play a hand in kind of going back to those cortisol levels with our adrenals as well, because hey, it's also ruled by another fire part of us. It's that part of us that's literally wanting to drive and keep on going and working, which does tend to put a great burden on the heart and the circulatory system, kind of reflexing back to Leo and Aquarius here as well. I also didn't mention, but Leo does rule with Capricorn, and I didn't mention it in Capricorn either. That Leo and Capricorn do actually rule the gallbladder as well. And I guess I didn't mention them here in the polarities because the gallbladder doesn't have too much to do with these things, but they can, because it's all connected, right? Lastly, our last sign polarity, that second mutable polarity, is Virgo and Pisces. This sign pairing tends to rule the digestive and immune axis of the body, which is all about assimilation, or basically absorption, discrimination, which is analyzing, and isolative, which is separating functions of the body. Now, Virgo rules the lower abdomen cavity, which includes the lower liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder. I've seen people say that it connects to the gallbladder, but I do think that it's more Leo and Capricorn, whereas I might be more specific and technical when I say maybe it's not the gallbladder, but it's actually the duodenum, which is ruled by Virgo, which is the part that actually decides how much bile from the gallbladder comes in to like digest these fats that are in here. That's like a very discriminatory, analyzing, managing part of the digestive system that I think is more Virgoan in nature for sure. The spleen. The spleen is where we produce our white blood cells, and actually like is a very etheric and very like I've seen in a lot of texts like how like energetic and where I've heard that it splits up the prana into etheric levels. Basically, I've seen that in more than one text, not those exact words, but basically speaking how kind of magical, I guess it is, how intangible or like really almost spiritual type things are happening with the spleen. And it's ruled by Virgo, and that makes sense to me. It's also co-ruled by Neptune, which also makes sense to me if it's kind of like a splitting of atoms type place in the body where things happen, because it's where our immune system kind of begins in a way with the white blood cells. And Pisces being part of the, like a huge part of our immune system, ruling the lymphatic system, which is our inner ocean. Virgo being the co-ruler of the spleen with Neptune does make sense to me. Because remember, Virgo is a very mundane sign, but it's not, because it's Pisces opposite. So Virgo is almost like this it's spirituality in the mundane. It's finding sacredness in the mundane. It's finding tangibility and holding the sacredness in our hands, and integrating it on a daily basis through the work, through the process, and not through the result. It's a very sacred, I mean, all of these signs are sacred, but Virgo, I seeing that as the ruler of the spleen is almost like the materiality and the tangibility, the tactileness of spirit is Virgo. And the Neptune part is the like energetic, like spiritual, intangible, completely in the ocean type energy that I guess happens in the spleen, which I'm for it. So this portion of the body, in this portion of the body, materials essential to nutrition are sorted out and separated from non-digestible materials. So the liver also tends to tends to discriminate between substances that are needed and those that are toxic. And it's considered Virgo being the ruler of the lower liver. Nutrients from food are assimilated or absorbed through the walls of the small intestine, which is ruled by Virgo. I think the large intestine and the colon is Scorpio at this point, but Virgo is the small intestine, where as the food is kind of going through, that's where we actually, through the walls of this small intestine, absorb all the vital nutrients that we need. That's very Virgo. Let's see. So Pisces now has these qualities too, because it rules the lymphatic system, which carries lymph, which is a fluid, to the tissues of the cells to kind of help bathe them and wash the cells of the muscles or tissues with, bathe them with this fluid, which removes and cleanses them of toxins and moves them out of stagnation so it doesn't build up. A good thing to note, if you've never known this before, that your lymph doesn't really move on its own. That's why it's recommended to exercise when you can, because moving your body, physical movement, and doing like fucking touching yourself and massaging yourself is what actually moves lymph throughout your body. It doesn't move on its own like blood does, unfortunately. So that's when we get, that's why we say that we're healthy when we exercise a lot. If you're someone who I just hate fucking exercising, but I try to move when I can, dance at home, just fucking move. Even if you don't like that, or if you're actually physically unable to do those types of strenuous exercises, if you're able to have help with or do it some way on your own, just give yourself self massage with a really nice oil, and then get in the shower and rinse off the top layer so you don't feel oily. But that is how we stay healthy and how we move lymph throughout our body, just in case you didn't know that. But that's an essential part of being healthy. It's a part of the immune system. And so with the immune system, with the lymph, and with that white blood cell coming from the spleen, this is our body's defensive mechanisms. Now, you would think that this would be under Aries for like defense, against invading pathogens, kind of going to war, but it really is under the realm of Pisces, believe it or not. Why that is, I don't have a good answer right now, but that just made me think about why that might be. I guess because Pisces and Virgo, you might hear the phrase, you might be familiar with people saying that this is a maybe with any of the water signs too, that they tend to, I don't want to be kind of putting things in boxes here, but it's said often how these are signs that really need to learn boundaries, because we like assume lots of energy coming from outside of us. And with Pisces, this is a sign that has difficulty in determining self from others sometimes. And it's because we want to merge with the universe and with the collective. So we often forget what's essential into kind of protecting the actual bodies that we do have every once in a while. So essentially what happens here is how we assimilate or absorb material from the outside world into our bodies and incorporate it into the self. And that's probably why Pisces is ruling this kind of etheric boundary level in our aura with the immune system and with the lymphatic system. I mean, it makes sense because it's like our inner oceans or inner water, but our interstitial matrix of water. It's like kind of a mouthful to say. That's why I had to like think about it. But basically when this happens, we're kind of absorbing everything that our body is telling us that we need. And Virgo is kind of doing this job of discriminating what we don't need. And then it kind of gets into Libra and those, kidneys, and with the liver being ruled by so many things, and then kind of going into the bladder or going into the colon to release out into our sweat, to sweat it out, and to expire it out, which technically is ruled by expiration, and exhaling is ruled by Sagittarius, and inhalation is technically ruled by Gemini, because it's the trachea, it's the lungs and all of that stuff. And then it goes through the process, and then Sagittarius kicks it back out through the Taurus region. It's a lot to think about, but so psychosomatically, confusion, issues of concerning the self versus the other, and personal boundaries do tend to get connected with this axis and can actually contribute to digestive or immune disorders. So that is something to kind of keep in mind a little bit there. But this is really what I wanted to share with you guys, not what they rule individually, but how the polarities actually work together in the body and contribute to a healthy terrain or ecosystem that you are. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shout out. This is a little preview of what to expect for the Astro Herbalism workshop. Now, this specific stuff I won't be talking about, but it will be written out in detail in the handout. So if this does interest you, if you want to learn about how to tell what signs, what plants are ruled by certain planets and how to use them in correlation to these areas of the body, as well as certain techniques to kind of potentize your at-home medicine making with astrology, then feel free to join me for the Astro Herbalism Intro to Astro Herbalism workshop that is next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. As patrons, you guys get to choose a sliding scale, whatever works for you, between $15 and $30. You can Venmo me that or send me a PayPal, and I'll have all of the information down below. But otherwise, really look forward to doing these types of things for you all of the time, and I hope that they are illuminating and interesting and educational for you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a lovely new moon in Leo.